Welcome to Fast Keto. I'm your host, Ketogenic Girl. Did you know that you actually have the option to either be a sugar burner or a fat burner? It's called having a metabolic advantage, as Dr. Ben Beekman would put it. You can actually burn your own stored body fat for fuel. On this show, we talk about ketogenesis, fasting, biohacking, all with the goal of optimal body composition for longevity and having the highest possible quality of life. I hope you enjoy these interviews and solo casts that I present to you, all with this goal in mind. Hey guys, welcome back to Fast Keto. I absolutely love this episode. It's an interview with Matthew Cruz. He's known online as the Carnivore Cruz, which is a very punny name. He is someone that really inspired me. I heard him speak on the Carnivore Cast podcast about his struggles with addiction and overcoming addiction by eating real food. And we had a great conversation today all about how providing really nutrient-dense food can help overcome addictions, and how his addictions that he struggled with for years just kind of fell away for him, when he started really emphasizing nutrient density with a ketogenic diet and also carnivore, which is defined as a ketogenic diet as well. So we had a really wonderful conversation, and I hope you enjoyed the episode. Matthew is a husband, father, and engineer, and he battled with his weight and addictions for his entire life. Over the last few years, he was using his engineering training to understand the drivers behind some of his own obesity and addiction. He got into paleo, he found keto and carnivore, and he found that not only did his weight stabilize, but his struggles with addiction were dramatically reduced. And he loves to wrestle with his kids now, grill steaks, and cheer on others who are on their health journeys. And you can follow him online, and he has very generously shared a lot of resources with us today, different videos and studies and references that he found helpful in dealing with his addiction. And I'm going to put all of that in the show notes for you guys if you want to check out anything, because I know some of the Robert Lustig videos he mentioned are super interesting. So I hope you guys dig into today's episode and enjoy it as much as I got getting to record it. If you're a regular listener of this podcast, you know that the keto diet is one of the best ways to lose weight and burn fat. But like all diets and lifestyle, sometimes it can be harder to stick to. One of the hidden secrets out there is eMeals, which is an app that helps you with the keto diet. If you start today, you can get 30% off by using their code Ketogenic at emeals.com/keto. They have recipes that are amazing, and they show up every week on your phone. With a click, you can get all the ingredients delivered to your door. eMeals helps you save time and money, and I highly recommend them for anyone on the keto diet who has a busy lifestyle and finds sticking to this a little bit more challenging. You can use the code Ketogenic at emeals.com/keto and get started today with 30% off using that code. Trust me, you guys will love it. All right, welcome to the show, Matthew. It's so great to have you here with us today.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. Really excited to come and to share.
Awesome. Now, for anyone who may not know of you and your story, maybe you could start out just by telling us about what brought you to this whole keto space. And I put carnivore sort of under the keto umbrella since it's a ketogenic lifestyle. But what brought you here, and what's your background?
Yeah, so I was a classic fat kid. I grew up in a home that was very emotionally dynamic. My dad has bipolar, and so home wasn't really a safe place all the time. And so I learned from a very early age to manage my feelings with food. And so I would often sneak, cookies or bread or pizza or something like that and go be by myself and medicate how I felt with food. Often sugar tends to be highly effective at making you feel better, but then of course you feel the crash and you feel terrible. And so because of that, I became very overweight very quickly. I don't have any memories of being like healthy or lean or athletic. I was always the fat kid. And I think I was the fattest kid around my entire life. I don't think it was until college that I met someone who is bigger than me. And I'm 5'6", and at my peak, I was 18 years old, and I hit 265 pounds. And 265 pounds on a 5'6" frame gives you a 48-inch waist. So I was very big around the middle. At that time, I was doing a lot of musical theater. I wanted to get the lead part, but the director said I was too fat, which was probably one of the kindest things someone could tell me. And so I kind of gritted my teeth, said like, okay, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to eat healthy, I'm going to exercise. So I did that. And
Motivate you.
yeah. And so gritted my teeth, and for 9 months, I kind of ate a quote unquote healthy diet. I was eating so poorly at the time that anything other than what I was doing was healthy. So I kind of did the classic standard American diet, but like the healthy version. So it was lots of rice and vegetables and lean meats, lots of chicken, stuff like that. Cut out all the sugar, cut out desserts, cut out soda. But it was still a high carbohydrate because I really liked rice and I really liked bread. I was just eating whole wheat bread now. So it was.
Right, and like calories. So it's kind of like a diet.
Yeah. So it was healthier, no doubt. And I also started running my guts out. I think I averaged like 4 to 8 miles every day. And after 9 months, you do something like that, and I ended up losing about 80 pounds.
Wow.
So that's one of these things I tell people, like, hey, it's not that like calorie restriction and exercising doesn't work. It's just insanely difficult. And I was young enough that my body could take that. So I did get down
Right.
to I did get down to 185, kind of stayed there, lost a little bit more, but my weight would kind of fluctuate. I was always afraid of going high again. And then I got to my mid 20s and I got married and my weight started coming back. And I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? So I started this kind of deep exploration, just like trying to find things. And that's when I came across keto and the two keto dudes and like NSMG and like all these things that were starting to happen. So I started just diving deep into that. And so I started with paleo. That wasn't really effective. Then I started doing keto. And what was wonderful about keto is that I was never hungry. I wasn't losing weight, but I wasn't hungry anymore, which was fantastic. And then I continued to explore because I'm like, hey, I actually do want to lose weight. And then eventually I came across carnivore. And carnivore is, like you said, like a subset of keto. It's a more restrictive version of it. But I think like, hey, keto, carnivore, let's all just give each other a big group hug. I don't really kind of differentiate between the groups. I just say like one's a version of the other. So,
well, they're both by ketogenesis, in my opinion. I love the big hug thing, though.
Yeah, I don't think it's worth quibbling over if they're, yeah. Carnivore is just a type of keto, and that's one of the things I tell people when they ask me, like, hey man, like what do I need to do or whatever. I'm like, dude, if you're rocking keto, you just keep crushing keto. Like if that's getting you to your goals and you're living a happy, full life, you don't need to do anything else. Like, so be aware of where you're trying to get. And if you're there, stop, be happy, enjoy life.
Yeah.
So, but I wasn't there. And so I was continuing to explore. And then I came across carnivore first with two keto dudes, with Amber O'Hearn. They brought her on. She started talking. And I thought at the time, that is crazy. But it sounds delicious. So I'm thinking about it. And then I came across Dr. Sean Baker on Joe Rogan, classic carnivore entry story. This guy seems really sane and he seems very well spoken and he seems very educated. I'm like, okay, maybe I'll give this thing a shot. And so when I moved to Detroit for work, I had a 2-month period where I was going to be here in Detroit, but my wife and kids were going to be back in Portland, Oregon for 2 months in that was just due to the logistics of buying and selling houses and whatever. So I said, hey, this is a great time for me to try out this carnivore thing, and it's not going to disrupt my family at all. So I went hardcore carnivore, just meat and eggs and black coffee. And that was pretty much it. Trying to think bacon, of course, bacon. You have to have the bacon. So, and what was awesome is again, I wasn't hungry, but then I started to lose. Well, let me correct this. I'm not aware if I really lost weight or not. I don't measure my weight because for me, weight is not the goal. My waist circumference is the goal. My shape, how I feel in my clothes, that's the goal. And so that was what I was using as my metric. Like, hey, how big around is my waist? I don't care what the number on the scale says. If I'm 200 pounds, but I am lean and ripped, great. If I'm 150 pounds, but just soft all over and weak, I don't care that I'm 150 pounds. So that's why I don't know. So going through the process, I lost 4 inches in 2 months with zero effort, which was fantastic. But one of the other things that was really awesome is that several addiction symptoms that I've been struggling with really started to go away. I had struggled with pornography for a lot of my life. Started to struggle with alcoholism. Nothing as severe as what a full-on alcoholic would be, but I definitely felt a really strong need to use it to relax, and I would hide my use of it from my wife, and those are classic symptoms of addiction. And also the food addiction. Like I didn't feel like I need to like have bread. I didn't feel like I need to have sweets to make myself feel better. And so that happened after about 6 weeks, and I was like, whoa, this is huge, because I'd always felt this need to medicate myself and to control myself and make myself feel better. But now I wasn't experiencing that drive anymore. And for someone who had struggled with that so much, that is huge. That is incredibly huge. And I'm not sure how much you wanted me to go into all those stories of struggling with addiction, but that was what I experienced, and it was pretty dramatic.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's an amazing story. And it sounds like you're a lot more focused too on body composition. And one of the things I wanted to quickly mention is you were talking about how, traditional diets can work for people, even high carb diets with lots of exercise, say, but high carb diets can work. But I'm really curious right now about body composition changes that happen on traditional diets, because everything that I've studied in biochemistry about ketogenesis and fat burning tells me that a lot of weight that people lose on traditional diets is not actually fat. I think a lot of it is actually water and some muscle and maybe some fat. And there's just a lot of other body tissues that are affected. But then it creates this horrible cycle, because then when people go off that temporary diet, then they just gain fat back, because you don't just gain like the muscle back. So over time, people end up in a worse and worse situation. I love that you don't go by the scale, but you go by how you feel in your body and how your clothing fits, because that's one of the huge differences with ketogenesis. You actually burn fat.
Yes. No, and that is absolutely true. And one of the reasons I wanted to focus on the waist is because in my mid 20s, when I saw my weight going up, I did try to exercise my way out again. Like, hey, I did this before, I can do it again. And so there's a period there where I tried the same old thing, where it's like, okay, vegetables, really lean meats, no sugar, no fun, quote unquote fun. Now that I haven't had sweets for a long time, like those don't actually even sound interesting. But yeah, it's fantastic. So I tried going back to it. I tried that same recipe I used when I was 18 to lose weight again, because I had started to go back up, and I think I hit 198. And I was like, oh no. And so I started just beating the tar out of myself and only eating oatmeal for breakfast, because everyone knows oatmeal is like so good for you. And I just felt like garbage. I just felt like complete garbage. And my weight like it did go down like a little bit, like maybe 5 pounds, but I was running stupid distances to try to make that happen and eating such a boring, such boring food. And I was like, this is not working. This is insane. And my mindset as an engineer is like, I think I'm giving the system the wrong inputs because it doesn't make sense to me that the human body would takes so much effort to reach a healthy state and a healthy body composition. That doesn't make sense to me. And I mean, I'm a Christian. I don't make any kind of like, I don't hide that or anything. And so like, hey, I have a slightly different view of the origin of the world or whatever. But like, even from an evolutionary perspective or from a religious perspective, like either way you look at it, like there's no way the human body is designed to be that difficult to manage. Like that does not make any sense. And so for me, that's kind of what drove me to like, I need to figure this out because this is not making sense to me because I'm beating the tar out of myself and I'm going nowhere. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And just a quick look at history gives us all the answers. Like it's only recently we domesticated grains and sugar. Although there are some other historical examples, like the Egyptians relied on a heavy grain diet. And there's some mummies. I don't know if you've ever seen this study. I think it was called the Horus study that came up. Mummies had like profound atherosclerosis in their 30s and just really, really young incidences of these arterial plaques and stuff from this high grain diet. But for the most part, the domestication and subsidizing of grain and sugar is really a more recent thing, and it's really co-opted our diet so dramatically with vegetable and seed oils. And you just look back at what we were eating before that, it just seems like this little blip in time that we've been eating this way.
And I completely agree with that. And this is when I start walking someone through when someone's like world's like a little shattered, when they look at me and like that dude eats just meat and he eats a ridiculous amount of meat, but like he lost weight. And like people have told me like, dude, you're getting like more muscular. Like again, I don't need a measurement to tell me I feel good. So I'm just like, I feel good. Like I don't need to like measure that. So I don't have a bunch of quantifiable information. But when someone comes to me and is like, dude, like what are you doing? Like what is going on? I start trying to like ease them into this. Like, dude, think about the fact that for most of human history, sugar was not a thing. Sugar was not available. And so like the most potent form of sugar that you could have possibly gotten was from honey. And that thing was guarded by tens of thousands of bees. So
freaking bees.
So like good luck. I mean, have fun with that. So
I always love like talking about that with honey. I'm like, did nature have any other better way to say stay away from this than having these little airborne flying things that can sting you?
You're gonna get really messed up trying to get enough honey. Yeah. Well, and the other one I talk about when people are just like, dude, what about fruit? Like fruit is so good. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about fruit. Fruit used to only be available in season, right? And you used to only be able to get it for a very short period of time. And I guarantee you that fruit was not nearly as sweet as the fruit that we have now because it's been so bred to be very large, to have tiny seeds, to have a really high sugar content. So I'm totally, if someone says, like, can I have fruit? I'm like, yeah, sure, have fruit, but have it in season. Like, like don't be having strawberries every day. Like that doesn't make any sense from a historical perspective. Like there's no way that's normal. There's no way, like it's normal now, but historically in terms of like human history, if we like zoom out, like there's no way that's normal. And so, think about this. And so that's why I think that sugar addiction is a thing because we have this food environment where it has very poor nutrient density. We're eating a bunch of carbohydrate. It's not making us feel full. And so we need to eat more because we don't have enough protein to build up our bodies. And that usually, typically, if you're eating a Western diet, it's going to contain a whole lot more sugar. And so you're getting a whole lot more sugar hit that's like beyond anything that would have been historically normal. So it makes sense that you're being caused to overeat by our poor food choices and our poor food availability. And then that is driving your additional sugar, which is then driving a dopamine response in your brain. It's like, it's no wonder you feel addicted because you are, friend.
One of the reasons I really wanted to invite you on the show is I related to a lot of different points on your journey, and I come from food addiction background myself, and I really had candy addiction from a super young age. I turned to candy for to soothe all of my stresses, and we were moving all over the world and living all around the world, which is super exciting, very stressful, as a kid growing up. And candy was my soother, literally, and carbs, even just going to the corner store and getting a whole bag of potato chips and finishing it off myself, that, or having tons of Kool-Aid, all this kind of stuff. It was not seen as super weird. It was kind of normal behavior amongst my friends, and just the amount of soda and candy and carbs we all ate. And for me, going very, very low carb to carnivore keto and really reducing my carbs, for me, I don't think it's necessary for everyone, like you were saying, but I've noticed common themes with people that I've interviewed on the show, that when there's some kind of addiction issue, that really, really helps. It makes a big difference in just reducing it as much as possible. And I quit sweeteners 2 years ago. And at the time, a lot of people were like, why are you doing that? And that just seems so unnecessary. But for me, it was perpetuating, the dopamine, right? The connection with the dopamine release. It was perpetuating the food cravings. And that was something that going very, very low carb to almost zero low carb has really helped me to, I just find that fascinating about your story when I was listening to your interview, which was on the Carnivore Cast, which was excellent. And I loved how you talked about what a major role just nutrient density and real food made in your recovery, because I love that connection of real food as medicine, and just how helpful it is. When anyone's trying to quit an addiction, it's a very difficult place to be. You're kind of naked out in the wind, with nothing, no safety vests or anything. You're just very much exposed with nothing to hang on to. And having real food provides so much. It just buoys you, it gives you all of this to fall back on, because your body is so well nourished and well fed. Your neurotransmitters are functioning much better. You feel better. You're not starving, like you were saying. And I'd love to talk more about that, and how, increasing your nutrient density and eating more real food really made a difference for you in your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things that kind of drove me in thinking that direction was some of the presentations that Dr. Robert Lustig gave, where he's kind of famous now on YouTube for some of the talks he has given. One of them being called Sugar, the Bitter Truth, and Fat Chance Fructose 2.0, which are fantastic. And he really goes into how the human endocrine system and how your food and hormone signaling interact, and how they interact with the brain. And he's done some really fascinating stuff. And the guy's a rock star. I love what he's doing. He's one of the doctors that's kind of taken this head on, amongst many others in this space now, which I'm really grateful for. And he really described it hey, sugar really disrupts our ability to feel full, and it also disrupts can cause this addiction cycle. And where he kind of points out is that what sugar does is that it's really kind of disrupting how your hormone signaling coming from your stomach and your liver, how that interacts with the brain. And I really suggest someone goes and checks out those videos. But basically, sugar keeps you from feeling full. And I believe it was specifically fructose, which can cause this more so than glucose. But it keeps you from feeling full, and so you're driven to eat more. And so that's what creates this like, oh, I need to eat, I need to eat, I need to eat, because your body intuitively knows like, well, I need vitamins, I need minerals, and I need amino acids. I need protein and I need fat and I need the vitamins to go with that, because some of those vitamins are only fat soluble. So your brain, your body is very smart. It wants to stay alive. And that's one of the things I realized, like, hey, my body is not fighting me. My body is trying to keep me alive, and I'm not fueling it correctly. It'll take care of me. I just need to give it what it needs. And so what he talks through is how sugar really disrupts that, and it keeps you from that sense of feeling full, so you eat more and more and more, and your body is also saying like, hey, I still don't have the nutrients I need to eat more. Now, that's bad enough, right? But now if we add on top of that, that sugar is something that can spike dopamine release inside of the brain. Now, this is where it can get really messy, and the science is inconclusive, and I'm just going to try to kind of lay it out here. So if you go by a strict definition of what is addiction, right? There's some clear things that get laid out in the science literature of like, hey, these are the things that are addictions. Like a person, they want to stop, but they don't feel like they can. A person will withdraw from social situations, so they draw away from friends, they draw away from family, so they can indulge in whatever the substance of abuse is or activity of abuse. They're going to possibly take undue risks to engage in that behavior or to get that substance. They're going to have feelings of withdrawal when they don't have it, and a tolerance can build up over time. And so you need a bigger and bigger hit to get a response. And so how does sugar and food quality really play in there? So again, I'm not a scientist, I'm not an MD, I'm just an engineer who's just trying to put the pieces together, and I'm going off my own experience. And so I saw what he was saying, and I saw that we have a lack of nutrient density. We have sugar, which is causing us to not feel full, but it is giving us a high, and our body likes that high. So when we get that, our mind is giving us that big hit of dopamine and saying, hey, that was good. Do more of that. Because that's really what dopamine is about. It's a chemical in the brain which says, that was a good thing. Remember what got us here. And that's a really important thing to note, is that when that happens, your mind is recording like, oh, well, I was walking through the mall and then I went by a Cinnabon and there was that smell and it smelled so good. You know what? I went and got one and I ate it and it felt so good, and I got this huge release of dopamine, but I also didn't feel full, so I needed to get another one, right? So now you've had two Cinnabons, heaven help you, and you've also, so you had a lack of nutrition because the Cinnabon wasn't really satisfying what your body needed, so you overate more, and then you got more sugar, and sugar released a whole bunch of dopamine, and then that dopamine basically put a stamp in your brain saying, this was good. How did we get here? Okay, we were walking in the mall, and we were walking by a Cinnabon, and we smelled that smell. Okay, now, whenever that happens, we need to do what we did again.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's the same thing, like, hey, I'm at a birthday party, and like, oh, that cake. Or and you see this across addictions. Like you talk about someone with alcoholism, like, hey man, whenever I walk down the street or whenever I am in an argument, or someone dealing with pornography, if they see some kind of image that reminds them of something, that's the brain, that's dopamine doing its job. Because your brain is trying to remember, how do we get these things that we want? And what was helpful for me is I started putting those pieces together as I'm starting to come out of several addictions. Like, oh my gosh, like this is so much bigger and harder than I thought. Because growing up, it was always a moral thing. Like, hey, morally, you're an overeater, and so morally that's bad. Like, yeah, it's bad, but like it was a moral problem. I didn't have enough self-control. I was a bad person. Hey, when I was struggling with pornography, oh, you're a bad person. Oh, you're struggling with alcohol. Oh, you're a bad person. It was always a moral thing. It wasn't a, hey, your brain has been miswired. Your brain has literally been miswired. And your food environment made this pretty much inevitable. Now, there are people who are more or less predisposed to addiction. And so someone might be able to go through the exact same thing I did and come out no worse for wear. Fantastic. Great for them. I, on the other hand, I'm not going to say I was predisposed to addiction because I haven't done some genetic test or something, but clearly I have addictive tendencies. And I had the classic signs of my childhood of like, hey, unstable home and fearful situations, lots of anxiety. Okay, that is how you make an addict. That is exactly how you make an addict. And so for me, kind of realizing that, like, oh my goodness, this is what's going on. The reason I'm struggling so much is because of this memory imprinting that's been done in my brain because of dopamine, and that was in part caused by my poor food environment. I need to make healthier choices around my food. I need to be engaged with community. I need to be connecting with people. And I think we don't have the randomized controlled trial, but I don't need a randomized controlled trial to tell me I feel better. That, hey, I started eating carnivore. I started being very purposeful about eating a really healthy food. I started eating until my body felt full. I tried to be mindful of how I felt, kind of ate intuitively. Wow, like I feel so much better. And that sense of lack of control that an addict often has, that slowly kind of faded away. Like, oh, I feel good. I feel in control of my body. I feel control of my appetite. I don't feel the cravings that I had before. And I think if you kind of back this up, part of it had to do with before I would overeat and overeat carbs and sugar because, again, my food wasn't nutritious enough, so I had to eat more of it. Now I'm eating in such a way that I have tons of nutrition. I have all the amino acids I could possibly want. I have vitamins. I have minerals. I got good, healthy animal fats. Like I'm rocking it. I'm eating some eggs. So now my body is very well fueled. And so, okay, now my body's feedback mechanism for, hey, you have enough, that's starting to work again, right? It's like, okay, you've eaten enough. And the fact that I gave myself permission to eat to satiety, even if like, oh my goodness, this is 3 pounds of beef. Like, yeah, that's okay. The fact that I no longer struggle with like, oh, do I feel full or not? Like, no, I feel completely satisfied and I'm not doing sugar, right? Because carnivore doesn't have any sugar in it. That craving died off and that need to medicate died off. Was it easy? No, but what I would say for someone going through this is like, hey, if you're going to go carnivore and part of it is the purpose of getting away from addiction, don't try to overthink your carnivore. Don't say like, oh, I'm only going to eat this much. Don't measure a darn thing. Stop that. Stop that right now. Just say like, hey, these are the foods that I really like, I really enjoy, and they're very nutritious. And I'm going to let myself have as much of that as I want. And that's where I warn some people about cheese, because cheese can be one of those things that like, hey, is it carnivore or not? Maybe, maybe not. But cheese I found to be another one of those things that's very easy for me to just overindulge in. And so I said, like, you know what? It's meat and it's eggs, and that's enough. And that's good. And so giving myself the freedom to say, like, I don't have to worry about how much to eat of this stuff. I can have as much as I want. That kind of gave me like the freedom to say, like, okay, well, I don't have to worry about restricting myself here. And it was great because now I can trust my body again. I can trust my body to tell me, hey, you've had enough. You're good. You're satisfied. And I don't have to worry about, is my body going to betray me and cause me to feel some need or desire that isn't really warranted.
Now, with that goal of having optimal quality of life in mind, and I define quality of life by the absolute amount of joy that you feel experiencing life, I created something called the 20-Day Ketogenic Girl Challenge. It's the best product that I could possibly create in order to help as many people as possible try keto out for themselves, get into nutritional ketosis or ketogenesis, and become fat fueled. When you become fat fueled, you transition out of that mode of being a sugar burner to being a fat burner. And all these incredible things happen. The first one is you start to burn your own stored body fat for fuel. Now, that's great because a lot of us want to have optimal body composition, less body fat, more muscle, stronger muscle and bone mass. But even if you're not looking to lose fat on your body, even if you're looking just to gain muscle or be strong as you continue to go through life, building muscle and strong bones, keto also helps with that. It's muscle sparing. So whether you're in it for weight loss, fat loss, optimizing your body composition, or just improving your overall energy, your mood, your health, I know I personally have never been happier in my entire life or feeling better in my body. And so much of that comes from being at my optimal goal. I have the highest quality of life for myself that I could have ever imagined because I'm at my ideal body composition. I am living my best life in this body and I'm making the most of being in this body. So that's why I created the 28-day challenge. And it's a program that comes with my meal plans, which are 4 weeks, about 28 days of meal plans. And in there you have shopping lists, full guide to getting into ketosis, testing for ketosis, which is optional if you want to do that. But the coolest thing about it is it also comes with my unlimited support and coaching. So I added this in after I had first created the program because I realized that so many of us have questions when we're starting out a brand new way of life, a new lifestyle. Not only do we have lots of questions, but we also need to have a lot of support. And so I created the 20-day challenge because we have a community in there of others who've done the program already, who've gone through it and love being there, love helping out and supporting other people who are joining. And then I'm also there answering your common questions, answering anything that comes to mind while you're trying this out. Do you want to substitute something in the meal plan for something else? Do you want to find a recipe for a certain specific event? Do you want to find what my recommendations would be for ordering off a menu at a certain restaurant? I'm there to help guide you. I know some of these are different kinds of requests, but I'm there to support you in any kind of question that you have doing keto. I love to provide explanations of how different processes work in the body, why ketogenesis works. I love to share any kind of insight and information that I can. And I'm there to be your guide, to be your support. Studies have shown that we get to our goals so much more easily and faster when we have a guide, when we have a friend, a coach, a support person keeping us accountable, keeping us motivated, excited. And that's what I'm here to do. I'm excited to help you get to your goals, get to your best health, because I have never been happier living and enjoying my life and being in my body. I've never had so much body confidence, so much strength, so much zest and excitement for life. And I love helping people experience that for themselves too. You can see dozens and dozens of success stories posted on my different feeds, on Instagram, on Ketogenic Girl. There's a section called Success Stories and Testimonials, and you can read through so many different successes that people have had doing the challenge. So I would love to have you join the challenge. Give it a try. There are other options too that can be added on and layered on during the program. I have my phase 2 higher protein plans if you're looking to build more muscle after you've started keto with the 28-day ones. I have build your day ones, no cook plans. I have vegetarian ones. I have all kinds of different versions and add-ons for later on if you decide that you are continuing at this. But what have you got to lose other than stored body fat? Use it for fuel. Optimize your health and your body composition today, and go check out the 28-day Ketogenic Girl Challenge at ketogenicgirl.com. Now, onto our show. Yeah, that's awesome. There's you brought up so many great points there. There's a few I just want to circle back to and highlight. The first, I love that you brought up Robert Lustig's videos, and I would encourage anyone to go and check those out. And I'll put them in the show notes too, because you were kind enough to send me so many helpful links for me to share with our listeners. But I think, it's really important to point out how sugar can really disrupt our hormonal signaling, especially with ghrelin and leptin. Yeah. And ghrelin revving our hunger and our hunger, our hunger, and leptin being, just a natural suppressant. What I'm fascinated by, you talked about, I love how you look at things from this incorrectly wiring approach being an engineer. I had an sugar addiction specialist on the show, and she talked about how in very young children, there are some who will take to sugar very early and others who will not be affected. Yep. So, like, there's one kid who can have one bite of a candy, and there's one who just can't. And they have more and more. And that what's fascinating is that pathway that the sugar lights up that sugar creates in your brain between having that stimulus and the dopamine, it creates this wiring that then makes a person more susceptible to other addictions, because that wiring, that pathway is there, and it lights up with other things too. And I think it's so important to have conversations about this, and I really want to acknowledge you for being so open about your struggles, because we have such high levels of addiction. I think in Western society, it's, we have sugar, it's a huge problem, and it's really affecting our health as a society, but we also have alcohol, phone addiction, like you mentioned, pornography, social media addiction. We have addiction to all these things that are sort of ways that we release dopamine, like you said, and we deal with stress. And it's so important to have these conversations. And, I was really inspired by your vulnerability and how much you shared. And people really need to go listen to that podcast episode because it was awesome. But the most fascinating part that I wanted to unpack was really the nutrient density of foods. And I think that it can be achieved with keto as well. To me, the main reason why it works really well with keto carnivore, I think there's meat in general is not, I don't think it really triggers that those reward pathways the same way that carbohydrates can, or even cheese can, like you brought up. But it emphasizes the most nutrient dense foods. And like you said, you just give yourself permission to eat intuitively. And by emphasizing all that nutrient density, a lot of times we're making up for years and years of nutrient starvation. And I noticed this trend with people who go carnivore, that sometimes at the beginning they see a lot, their appetite is just like very, very large. And they're eating a lot of meat, but over time it'll come down even sometimes to half. That the body's been provided with all these building blocks, to return to homeostasis, and then just it doesn't require as much. So did you find that you had that? And at what point did your addiction, I remember you mentioned on the carnivore cast that you kind of, some of these things just kind of fell away?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up. And yeah, it's really interesting, the whole body returning to homeostasis. So it was at the 6-week mark. Do 6 weeks of unlimited carnivore where I was eating probably 3 pounds of meat a day. And by that I mean meat, bacon, and eggs is what I was eating. So I gave myself no limit on that, and I ate till I was full. And when I mean full, I mean full. And I kind of went off. Yeah, I kind of went off what Michaela Peterson said in one of her talks when she was talking to her dad, saying, "Hey, if you feel like you can take another bite, you're not full." I'm like, huh. And so I ate till, like, you know what? I literally I cannot eat another bite. And what's strange is that it wasn't that horrible bloating that you get if you're eating a classic American Thanksgiving meal where it's like rolls and potatoes and all this stuff. It wasn't like oh my gosh, I feel so bloated. It's like I feel so utterly satisfied that another bite is completely uninteresting to me. That's the feeling of full I was going to. And it's at the 6-week mark that my appetite dropped by about half. And I was like, whoa, what is going on? It was very clear to me because I measured how much I ate in steaks. I'm like, okay, I'm eating 2.5 steaks a day, and then it dropped to 1.5. I'm like, and these are huge steaks, by the way. I'm like, what? What is going on? And it was also at that time, And well, I went on Reddit and said like, "What's going on?" And people were just kind of like, "Oh, you're fat adapted. Welcome to the club." I'm like, "Oh, right on." It was at that same time though that my struggle to look at pornography and to drink alcohol just kind of disappeared, is how I would describe it. Where before I was drinking bourbon pretty heavily, that addiction kind of developed over a year and a half, where life was very stressful, my work was very stressful. My wife and I started having kids, and so we had a 1 year old and another one on the way. And so anyone who's had kids knows that that's not a low stress event. So that's where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have a glass of wine. Okay, 2 glasses of wine. Okay, some bourbon. Okay, 2 things of bourbon. Okay, I'm just gonna pour a little bit in my glass when my wife isn't in the room. So clearly, some signs of addiction developing there. So I loved bourbon, and I knew which kinds of bourbon that I really liked. And it was at this time, at the 6 week mark, I'm just like, you know what, that doesn't even sound good. And I had some, and I tasted it, I'm like, this doesn't even taste good anymore. Like, why am I doing this? I don't want to do this. I don't like this taste. And so I just stopped. I just like walked away from it. I'm like, that's really weird. And someone might say like, oh, well, you weren't really addicted. I'm like, okay, I will give you that I was not addicted in the clinical sense, where I'm going out and like drinking an entire bottle of vodka and passing out in the street. But I had a very strong habit that I enjoyed indulging in, and that strong habit stopped pretty much on its own. Like there was no real effort put there. And it was also at that time, I had been heavily addicted to pornography for, probably a decade. And when I met my wife, I told her about my struggles and what was going on. And well, at the time, I had been doing a lot better. And when we met, about a year and a half into our marriage, a lot of stress started building from work and trying to finish a degree. And so I started medicating myself by using pornography. So I started really dealing with pornography addiction. I went to recovery group. I was meeting with guys every week, and that was helpful, but like the volume of that temptation was still really loud in my head. So get to 6 weeks of being alone in Detroit, high stress, new job, family across the country, not going well. My wife's having a really hard time. I'm stressed. We're trying to sell a house, buy a house, hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line. So again, I'm in a high stress situation. And again, that desire to look at pornography, to medicate how I feel, just like died off. And
It's just like you walked away from it or it fell away. That's just amazing.
yeah, well, and one of the things I'd like to tell people, kind of give them the caveat, it's like, hey, it's not like, hey, I'm like never tempted to medicate with that, but the volume of it went from a 10 to a 2, where it was just like, okay, yeah, I'm in a really stressful situation. Hey, yeah, I could do that. And then I'm like, why would I do that? I don't want to do that. And so for someone who's struggled with addiction their whole life, that is incredible. Because well, I'm not going to go into graphic detail, but like I was heavily binging for hours at a time every other day, looking at pornography to make me feel better and to just get away from the world, right? So that is just hugely addicted. So going from that to like, hey, you know what? That volume of that temptation in my head is just, it's so died off. It's so gone. I'm like, this is crazy, which is why I wanted to share my story, because, hey, I absolutely believe that people should get into community and connect with people and seek help to deal with their addictions. But would it not make sense that how we feed ourselves is going to affect the health of our minds? Like we know that, like, hey, when I have sugar, I get a buzz. We know that when I consume alcohol, I can get a buzz. We know that when I have coffee, I feel more wired. And those are all things that we ingest, and they all affect our mind. So wouldn't it make sense then that if we're feeding ourselves an incredibly nutrient-dense diet, that our mind would be clearer? And that's exactly what I experienced. I also completely agree with you that someone can do that completely just on keto. You don't have to go carnivore, But I also know that there's there's what people call, I think, dirty keto, or it's like I think if you're eating whole foods, healthy foods, not processed food, but like whole food keto, like, yeah, crush it. You can do it.
Yeah, my version of keto is really pretty carnivore adjacent and has always been just a huge focus on nutrient density and the lowest starch, green vegetables, because it's just all about that nutrient density. But it does boggle my mind sometimes when I see the range or the spectrum of what keto can be interpreted as, you know, especially when it's just interpreted as like a high fat diet, when it's more to me about the ketogenesis that occurs in the body from the control of starches. And you can do it with carnivore, you can do it with keto, you can do it with fasting. Like there's all these different approaches that have that in common. What's really interesting to me that occurred to me while you were talking about this is, as humans, if we're really deprived of nutrients on a high carb diet, and I love Dr. Ted Naiman's work on protein leverage satiety and everything. And he talks so much about some of the points you brought up about how the body will just continuously, if it's in survival mode, it'll keep triggering you to eat, certain foods in order to get its nutrient needs met. And yet, if we're so unsatisfied from our lack of nourishment, it makes us so prone to potentially looking for satisfaction in other ways, like especially with addictive behaviors and things. It's such a huge piece of the puzzle. So I just love that you had that experience of really nourishing yourself with real food, and that the volume of those urges for those habits like really decreased so dramatically. Because what a gift, to be battling something for so many years and then to have your physiology suddenly get behind you and like help you, to make those changes, to be more of the person you wanted to be, and, not have to fight your own physiology or your biochemistry or neurology.
Yeah. No, and it's funny because during that period of transition, I was searching for everything I could on carnivore. And one of the best resources out there was actually your podcast. You had done a series on it, and I really appreciated those. It was very encouraging to just have the information and have those interviews. And so I wanted to thank you for that, because it kind of like, okay, I'm not crazy. There's other people doing this. And I just wanted to say thank you. It was really helpful for me during that transition. I always refer people to those series of podcasts when they're like, hey, is this like, what is this like? Is this crazy? I'm like, no, it's not crazy. And there's this great podcast where they talk about a lot of it. And since then, much more has come out. We have Low Carb MD, and we have Carnivore Cast. I mean, there's tons of podcasts in the keto and carnivore space now, which is fantastic. But I wanted to thank you for being kind of one of the front runners.
Oh, thank you so much. That made my whole day just like podcasting such a one-way medium. So I love whenever anyone tells me like a certain episode stood out for them or something, because you're just kind of talking out and projecting out into the void sometimes. And it's really, really nice to hear that. But yeah, I'm going to definitely put a lot of the links that you shared with me today in the show notes so people can, refer to some of the information and studies that you mentioned and some of those resources, because I know, a lot of this you said was diet, but you also had a lot of support in community and finding resources to understanding your physiology and your biochemistry, and like it sounds like that probably released a lot of shame for you, feeling like, well, now I understand my physiology and why this is happening. And that can help someone too, like just to let go of those feelings.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that was a huge gift once I started diving into this, is finding that, hey, this isn't just this moral issue, like, oh, you're just bad and you need to be better or something like that, where we just constantly are just beating ourselves up for like not being good enough. I'm like, no, dude, your body is fighting you. Like, you're trying to go this way, but because of the way you're feeling yourself, and your body's going to respond this way. And so when you fuel yourself incorrectly, your body's going to fight you. It's going to do things you don't want, like cause addiction or cause you to eat more because it doesn't have enough vitamins, it doesn't have enough nutrition. And so when you can stop fighting your body and get in line with the program and say like, hey body, I'm going to feed you what you need. I'm going to feed you plenty of it. And I'm not going to put any garbage in that's going to just blow this thing up. Your body's like, okay, we're cool now. I'll take care of you. And so that for me was so relieving because for someone comes to you who's struggling with sugar addiction or any kind of addiction, it's like, hey, you know what? Odds are, man, this is not your fault. This is not your fault. It's your problem, but it's not your fault. And that's especially true of kids growing up in our nutritional environment where, you're constantly advertised to eat Fruitio Pebble Choco whatever cereal and like, hey, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And we're fed all this misinformation and then we're fed this garbage food. And our parents don't know. Our parents just want us to be happy and they don't know either. The information that is out there is just terrible. And so we have an environment that creates addiction. We have an environment that creates sugar addiction. We have an environment that creates food addiction. And some clinician may say like, well, actually, addiction is actually this. I'm like, okay, that's fantastic. But the moment someone comes to me saying, hey, I want to stop doing something and I do not feel like I can, and I'm hiding it from people and I feel ashamed of it, dude, you're struggling with addiction. Like, it may not be clinical addiction, but it sure is practical addiction. And that's what I'm really wanting to help free people from. Like, if you're struggling with sugar addiction, it's a real addiction. You need to take it seriously. And you need to realize, like, hey, this wasn't your fault. This wasn't your fault. You don't have to be ashamed of this. We have resources. We have a community. We will help you. We will cheer you on. And you know what? You're probably going to screw up. You're probably going to be at a birthday party and eat some cake because you know what? That was such a strong trigger in your past, in your mind. Like, that's just how it's wired. And it's going to take time to rewire it. And that's okay. But commit to the long haul and commit to connecting with people who are going to cheer you on. And we're out there. There's a ton of people doing keto, doing carnivore, who are going to love those posts saying like, hey, you know what? I've lost 10 pounds. I have 50 to go, but and we're going to say, yeah, you keep rocking it. You keep crushing it because it is a journey. And so embrace the fact that journey is going to have some stumbles and some falls.
Wow, that's really beautifully said. And yeah, I really appreciate you being here and sharing that with you. And I can tell you are fired up by this mission. And I really, I hope that you can touch a lot of people's lives by sharing your story because it's so powerful and it's such an important discussion and dialogue to be having, especially when we see such high and rising rates of opiate addiction and fentanyl and all these problems and, on the rise. And it's very concerning, to see these things. So the conversation that you're having, the dialogue that you're having, I'm sure it wasn't easy to share, but it's so helpful for so many people. So thank you,
absolutely.
For willing to do that. And where can people follow you and find more, of your posts and your journey and sort of resources and things that you share?
Yeah, so you can find me. I've slowly been blogging on carnivorecruise.com. That's carnivore and then CREWS. It's my last name. carnivorecruise.com. I'm also Carnivore Cruise on Twitter and on Instagram. Hit me up. I'm very responsive to any messages, tweets, or posts there. And I'm more than happy to talk with people with what they're going through or just kind of providing feedback or whatever. And I just love following people and love cheering people on and being a part of people's journeys of health. It's fantastic. I'm loving it.
Awesome. That's so cool. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Matthew. And I'm looking forward to following your journey as it continues to continue inspiring people. And really appreciate your time in joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right, guys, thank you so much for being here today and tuning in. I would like to invite you to check out the 20-Day Ketogenic Girl Challenge. A lot of the things that we talked about on today's episode I find are really solved by doing a ketogenic meal plan like the one that I designed, the 20-day Ketogenic Girl Challenge. And a lot of that comes down to having someone already calculate everything for you, having the macros all dialed in for you, having this meal plan with all the portions already outlined for you. It really helps address a lot of the portion control issues, and having everything calculated already really helps with preparation and doing batch prep. A lot of people on the challenge will pick out a day, say on Saturday or Sunday, and they'll meal prep ahead for the week, and they'll pick 2 or 3 days from the plan that they love, and they'll repeat it, such as day 5, which has the burger with my special keto burger sauce, and repeat that. And you can do that as many times as you like, and it really makes preparation and following keto and the meal plans a lot easier, and doing that batch prepping and meal prep on the weekend. And the meal plans also come with a shopping list. They come with a full guide to testing yourself for ketosis. And the best part is they include my support and coaching in our members Facebook group, which is an awesome community. I love being in there, and it really helps so much having other people doing this program with you and alongside, and people who've done it already and successfully reached their goals there to inspire you and to support you. And having that community built in is so important. Our success rates go way, way up when we're doing any kind of diet or lifestyle change when we have a buddy. And I'm here to be your buddy, to be your guide, and help you with your journey, because you can post any questions that you have about keto, about the meal plans, about low carb, and I am there to answer your questions and to support you as you go. And I just think it makes such a big difference to have a coach and a support group and a supportive community around you. So check out the 20-day Ketogenic Girl Challenge. Just a word of caution, there is another 20-day keto challenge that's being sold. It is not mine. I only sell my program from ketogenicgirl.com. So if you see a link to that, it's a copycat version that has kind of popped up in the last year. It also has a similar name, 20-day Ketogenic Challenge. But if you are looking for my program, which comes with my support and coaching, you can only get it from ketogenicgirl.com, and make sure that you are purchasing the one from me, because I have some people who have purchased this other program thinking that it's my program, and the coaching and support is not included because it's not the program that I formulated and that has had so much success. If you want to read and check out some of the success stories, you can go to ketogenicgirl.com and click on testimonials and reviews or success stories, and you can read some of the dozens and dozens of success stories of people who have done the challenge. And if you join the program, you'll get to interact with so many of those people in the group who've had real success and are there to share tips and tricks for making all of this so much easier and so much fun. So check out the 20-day Ketogenic Girl Challenge at ketogenicgirl.com. And until the next episode, I hope you have a fat-fueled rest of your day. A few disclaimers. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice, as I am not a qualified healthcare provider. The information presented on this podcast is for educational purposes only. Ketogenic Girl is not qualified to provide medical advice. Consult your own physician for any medical issues that you may be having. This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to this podcast. Prior to beginning a ketogenic diet, you should undergo a full health screening with your physician to confirm that a keto diet is suitable for you, and to rule out any conditions or contraindications that may pose risk or that are incompatible with a ketogenic diet. A keto diet may or may not be appropriate for you if you have any kind of health condition, whether known to you or unknown, so you must consult your physician to find this out. Anyone under the age of 18 should consult with their physician and their parents or legal guardian.